Snow drifted lazily across the town square, softening the hard edges of winter as lanterns flickered to life for the Christmas charity auction. Wooden stalls were lined with quilts stitched in bright patterns, jars of honey catching the light, pies cooling in the cold air, and hand-carved toys meant to bring smiles to children's faces. The townsfolk gathered close, stamping their boots and rubbing their hands, ready to bid generously for a good cause and a bit of holiday cheer. Laughter rose and coins clinked as one item after another found a buyer. Near the end of the table, however, sat a modest basket that seemed almost to disappear among the finer offerings. It belonged to Mrs. Hale, the widow who lived at the edge of town in a small, drafty house. Since her husband's passing, she survived by selling eggs, mending torn coats, and stretching every penny as far as it would go. Inside her basket were simple things made with care rather than cost. Jars of homemade jam, neatly folded knitted mittens, dried apples tied in cloth, and a small handwritten note wishing peace and warmth to whoever might take it home. When the auctioneer lifted the basket, his voice lost some of its cheer. He called for bids, once, twice, and waited. People glanced at the contents, then at one another, their eyes sliding away. Some thought the basket too plain, others felt an uncomfortable tug of sympathy they did not know how to answer. The silence grew awkward, broken only by the whisper of snow and the crackle of lantern flames. Mrs. Hale stood at the back, hands clasped tightly, her face calm but tired, as if she had already prepared herself for disappointment. With each passing second, the unsold basket seemed heavier, carrying not just its contents, but the loneliness and quiet hope of the woman who had made it. The auctioneer was just about to set the basket aside when the heavy wooden doors at the edge of the square creaked open, drawing every eye. A blast of cold air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of pine and snow. In the doorway stood a man few people knew well, though everyone recognized him at once. He was the mountain man who lived beyond the ridge, far from the warmth of neighbors and the comfort of town lights. His coat was thick and weather-worn, his beard dusted with frost, and his boots were caked with mud and ice from the long walk down. Murmurs spread through the crowd as he stepped forward, slow and steady, as if he were more used to trails than wooden planks. Some remembered seeing him trade furs once a year, others recalled him helping during a flood and vanishing again without thanks. He did not smile or nod, instead, his sharp eyes moved straight to the small, overlooked basket still resting on the table. For a moment, he said nothing. He simply studied it, then lifted his gaze toward Mrs. Hale standing quietly at the back. Something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding of hard winters and harder silences. Without drama, the man reached into his coat and pulled out a single, worn $5 bill. The auctioneer, startled, cleared his throat and asked for the bid. The mountain man raised his hand slightly and spoke in a low, firm voice that carried across the square. $5. Gasps rippled through the crowd. $5 was far more than anyone had expected for such a simple basket, more than many items that had already sold. Mrs. Hale's breath caught as she stared, hardly daring to believe what she had heard, while the mountain man remained still, as if the choice had been the most natural thing in the world. The auctioneer struck the table, his voice shaky as he declared the basket sold, but the mountain man did not turn toward the seats like the other buyers had. Instead, he lifted the basket carefully, as though it held something fragile, and walked straight toward Mrs. Hale. The crowd fell into a hushed stillness, unsure of what they were witnessing. He stopped in front of her and gently placed the basket back into her hands. For a moment, she looked confused, thinking there must be some mistake, but then she saw the warmth in his eyes. "Christmas should come back home," he said quietly, his voice rough from cold and years of solitude. Before she could speak, he nodded toward the basket and stepped away, leaving her clutching it to her chest. Her fingers trembled as she noticed a folded paper tucked beneath the cloth and apples. When she opened it, her eyes filled with tears. It was not a receipt or a message of thanks, but an offer written in simple, steady words. The man promised firewood stacked for the winter, repairs to her leaking roof and broken steps, and work paid in advance so she would not have to worry about the months ahead. A soft murmur spread through the crowd as people began to understand. Pity faded, replaced by something gentler and stronger. Mrs. Hale tried to speak, but no words came, only a silent nod and a hand pressed to her mouth as tears slipped free. The basket she had made in hope had returned to her carrying something far greater than money. It carried dignity, relief, and the sudden knowledge that she was no longer invisible. The mountain man did not wait for applause or gratitude. He simply turned and walked back through the thinning crowd, leaving behind a quiet, powerful moment that none of them would ever forget. The moment did not end when the mountain man walked away, it lingered in the air like warmth after a fire is lit. People shifted uneasily at first, then something in them softened. Whispers turned into conversation, and conversation turned into action. A shopkeeper stepped forward and quietly told Mrs. Hale she could take flour and sugar whenever she needed through the winter. Another neighbor promised coal for her stove, while a woman who ran a small tailoring business offered steady sewing work with fair pay. What had once been an uncomfortable silence became a shared resolve, as if the town had been reminded of a part of itself it had nearly forgotten. The auction continued, but it was no longer just about buying goods. Bids grew higher, not out of competition, but out of generosity. Laughter returned, and even the cold seemed less biting as people smiled more easily at one another. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, asking questions about the quiet man from the mountains and why everyone looked so moved. The auctioneer, his voice steadier now, glanced often at Mrs. Hale, who stood surrounded by neighbors instead of alone at the back. Her shoulders, once drawn inward, slowly relaxed as she realized she was being seen not as a burden, but as part of the community. No one noticed when the mountain man slipped away into the snowy night. There was no farewell, no thanks shouted after him. Yet his presence remained, woven into every kind word and every raised bid. By doing one simple, unexpected thing, he had shifted the heart of the town. He did not just buy a basket, he reminded everyone that kindness could be quiet, deliberate, and powerful enough to change how people looked at one another. Christmas morning arrived wrapped in a stillness that felt different from the days before. Snow lay untouched on rooftops, and the town woke to a softer kind of quiet, one filled with contentment rather than cold. From Mrs. Hale's small house at the edge of town, a thin ribbon of smoke curled steadily into the pale winter sky. Inside, the rooms were warm. Fresh firewood was stacked neatly by the wall, the roof no longer let in icy drafts, and the broken steps had been made sturdy. Again, for the first time in a long while, she moved through her home without fear of the coming weeks. The basket sat on her table, no longer a symbol of worry, but of hope reborn. Down beyond the ridge, in a lonely cabin surrounded by tall pines, another fire burned just as brightly. On a rough wooden table rested the same basket, now empty, its jars and middens given away, yet treasured all the same. To the mountain man, it was a reminder of a night when a small choice carried great weight. He ate a simple meal, listening to the wind outside, knowing that the cold felt easier to bear when someone else was warm because of him. In town, neighbors greeted one another with genuine smiles as church bells rang and children's laughter echoed through the streets. People spoke of that $5 bid not as an act of charity, but as a turning point. It had shown them that generosity was not measured by what was bought, but by what was restored. Long after the snow melted and winter passed, they would remember that Christmas is the year everything changed, all because one man chose to see what others had overlooked.